When I thought about coming down here, the part that most excited me for the whole couple days is probably the next 45 minutes to an hour, okay? Less than 10 to 15% of any baseball practice I've ever been involved in is on the mental and emotional part of the game. A lot of guys with talent. A lot of guys have trouble corralling their thoughts and their emotions when they pitch, among other things. Would you agree with me with that? And so I thought about coming down, and then you see what we're going to have is our two hosts. They look a little different. They threw a little differently. And I thought it would be a great opportunity for us to ask them questions and begin a dialogue, okay? But if I could, as I get started, let me tell you about a trip in the last 12 months I took that made it even a little different for me and put it in context, can I? Last fall, I went up to Azusa, California. And I'm talking to the junior college coach who holds the California record for most junior college wins. And alongside me is a guy who called himself Dr. House. And I walk into this room of pitchers, right? And this guy looks at Tom, and he has this look in his eye like, get this guy away from me. And I said, you must know him. So I walk up to him and Skip Clapper, and I said to Skip, who's been the Citrus coach, for the last century and a half. And I sat there and said to Skip, you must know this guy. He says, I know him. I said, where do you know him from? He says, I'm still trying to put my battle and hit the ball for the first time when he was pitching. He says, I hit against him for 3 years in high school, 2 years in college, and I never found a way to foul off a single pitch. I said, did he throw it by you? He says, he couldn't throw it by anybody. He says, but nobody I knew within a 50-mile radius wanted to get in the box against Tom.
I gotta go meet that guy.
He said, and the worst part about hitting against that guy, whether it was at USC or down at La Puente, was that he got out there to the mound. He said he was about, 5 foot something, and he was always smiling because he just knew where he was going to stick the baseball. I'm not sure exactly what he meant by that. But all he knew is he kept striking out, and this little guy kept going. And what Skip told me that day was he was one tough hombre on the mound. Mentally, he says he may not have been able to throw the ball as hard, but nobody tougher did he see. And he took that, of course, reputation when he was your age, from high school, where he's still a legend in that neighborhood, to 33-5. Is that right at USC?
Yeah.
You guys probably don't know. In high school, he probably threw, what'd he throw? 4 no-hitters and 2 perfect games. And then, as he likes to say, he was then drafted in the top 50 rounds of the professional draft with his 9-year major league career. And I'll tell you, from working with him for a while, if we sit there and we start to pick his brain, it's pretty interesting when he stood on top of the mountain what he was thinking. And then, of course, with Nolan, besides the records, let me just tell you, as I walked down the freeway 2 weeks ago, somebody close to me is in a meeting with Tony Gwynn at San Diego State in his first team meeting. And they're asking him who he liked to hit against and who he didn't like to hit against. And he said, Maddox? He said, Maddox never bothered him. He said he couldn't throw the ball by me, so all I did was sit on his 60% fastballs, put the bat on the ball, didn't bother me. A couple hard throwers, they said, nah. He said, I was pretty comfortable in the box against them. They could throw it pretty well. And they said, okay, who was the toughest guy you ever tried to hit the baseball against? And he said, with almost a sad smirk in his eye, this guy told me, Tony Gwynn looks at him and says, there's only one guy that good. He says, I never wanted to get into the box against Nolan Ryan. And this guy said, why not? Tony Gwynn says, because he brought it every single pitch. No matter what he threw, he brought it hard, and he brought it with attitude. And he says, he's one of the only guys I ever got in the box against where I looked at him and know he was more comfortable on the mound than I was in the batter's box. And if you know Tony, there's not many times it happens. And then the guy says to him, he says, do you think anybody else had that kind of feeling? And then the smirk began. This is a treat for me, and I'm sure it is for you, to get these two guys engaged in a conversation. One guy who could throw a ball through a building, and another guy who could hardly get the ball to the building. Who found an absolute way, in their own way, to have some of the most distinguished careers, and in their neighborhoods, there's nobody better. So maybe can we start? I gathered some questions from all of us here. Want to know? Sure. Nolan, would you start with us? First question I got asked was, other than you two toughest mental and emotional pitchers that you admire in your career, and why you thought they had it together when it came to the mental side of the game.
Well, to be honest with you, I really haven't thought about it like that before, but I guess two guys that come to mind are Bob Gibson and Steve Carlton. Tom Seaver certainly fit in that category. And there's a common thread that ran through all three of them, and they were very good competitors. They were well conditioned. They knew what they wanted to do before they went out on the mound, and they did it. And they did it day in and day out. Every time they went out, they were consistent in their performance and their approach to their job. And I think that's what made them such competitors and made all three of them so successful.
Tom, do you have anybody you add to that?
Sandy Koufax, because I grew up in LA and I did get a chance to know him and watch him toward the end of his career. And then Tom Seaver, because I played with him at USC. Now there's a common thread there. Tom Seaver was a man amongst boys at USC. Physically prepared, mentally, emotionally. He kind of like, you know how you pick someone to pattern your life after? I kind of like tried to become mentally, emotionally a mini Tom Seaver. So Koufax and Seaver. We're talking about Hall of Famers, all right? There's some lights going off here, guys.
Thanks. And if you guys have other questions and chime in and follow-ups, that would be great. Another thing people wanted to know is that everybody talks about success as pitching one pitch at a time. Okay? And it seems that the consensus here was that that's easier to say than it is to prepare to do and to do. And so what they would like is if you have some ideas about what that meant for you, what it means in advice for them, about how to prepare to pitch one pitch at a time, stay in the moment. You know, how hard a work is that in practice to get ready to prepare to do that on the mound?
Well, I think Pat covered that tonight with what he said about anger management. What I found was that early in my career, I called it fighting myself. And when I'd get frustrated at the fact that I couldn't throw strikes, and I didn't know how to make that adjustment to throw strikes through my delivery. And each level that I went up, when I was on the high school level and then in A-ball, those kids helped me out a lot because they were intimidated or they thought they had to get their bat started or whatever it might be, and they helped me be successful because they swung at bad pitches. But each level I went up, not only did the talent get better, but they got smarter. They became more competitive. They knew what they had to do to be successful. So once I got to the big leagues, and I got to the big leagues at 19, and I got there much earlier than I should have, not knowing how to pitch. So I had to learn to pitch on the big league level. So I observed successful pitchers that I respected. And I also started trying to figure out what I had to do. And I would watch other kids come up and do the same thing I do and have what I would call self-destruct on the mound. And they'd lose their rhythm, lose their concentration, and they'd be out of the game in third inning. Where successful pitchers might give up a couple of base hits or walk a guy, but they would regroup and you'd find them in the game in the 8th inning. And why was that? And so that was a start of me learning to control my emotions and learning what I had to do to be successful. And I found that you cannot be distracted, and I developed what I call tunnel vision. And so if I threw a bad pitch, there was a reason I threw that bad pitch. If that pitch didn't go where I wanted it, I learned through my delivery and my repertoire of my checkpoints and what I had to do to throw and be successful, I knew that I had to make an adjustment. And so once I learned to make that adjustment and not be distracted by it, and if I went out in the first inning and I gave up 4 runs, then my job was to hold them right there and give my team opportunity to win. And so my attitude when I went out to pitch a ball game, I went out and I'm thinking, what in the world am I going to do to throw a strike? And I look over in the dugout, and Dale Rice is standing over the training bag drinking a bottle of Maalox. And I'm going, how am I doing? I'm killing my manager, boy. And he's probably at wit's end like I was. What in the heck am I going to do? It's the first inning, and this guy can't even come close to striking. Short end of the story, I struck that guy out, got out of the inning, didn't give up a run. I backed off, said, you know, I have to get this ball down, I have to throw a strike. Because I knew at that time that guy wasn't going to swing. And he wasn't going to swing at the next pitch, because I wasn't getting it over. So I had 2 free pitches before they were even going to try to hit me. And so I got out of the inning. And it was just one of those things. But those kind of experiences is what led to me being able to concentrate and think about what I had to do and to focus. And, you know, that was through experience, and that just came to me over a long period of time, learning to deal with my failures and how to turn that around. But I was always looking to be a better player, whether it was physically or mentally, and I always paid attention to the guys that were successful that I played against and tried to observe what made them better players.
Now that's a power pitcher who hitters have to adjust to. I'm the flip side. I was not a power pitcher who had to adjust every pitch, 1 pitch at a time, to what the previous pitch created with the situation. I was short on stuff, but I could always throw strikes. From day 1, I could get 3 pitches over the plate. I can remember when we first signed professionally, they had scouting reports on everybody, and basically it was hard in, soft away, don't let them beat you with a breaking ball. Well, that worked for power pitchers, but it didn't work for me. So I figured out early on I had to have a venue of choices with every hitter on every pitch for me to succeed. When I first went to USC, the first bullpen I had, I actually threw next to Tom Seaver. And I'm up there, and my stuff is... Seaver is going... And I'm going, in my mind's eye, I'm going, if this is what USC and Division I baseball is all about, I have no chance. Seaver finished his workout, started walking toward the dugout, and Rod Dato's behind us, and he said, Tommy House, what'd you think of that? And I said, Skip, if that's what I got to do, I got to go. He said, you don't have to do that. He said, you got to throw a breaking ball and a changeup for a strike, spot your fastball, and go between the lines knowing that if you do those 3 things, you'll have the same record that he does here at USC. You're going to win a lot of ball games. He's going to throw the first game hard. You're going to throw the second game soft. You either got to be before the bat or after the bat. So what Nolan's saying about it, every critical juncture, someone clicks something on. Now everybody in this room, you guys at your various levels are going to dominate, but there's going to come a time when you have to become a pitcher. And what you do is take the best of what Nolan's talking about and the best of what I'm talking about. When I tell you, Kevin, you got to have 3 pitches to 2 locations to pitch in the big leagues, learn how to do it when you're 14. And if you happen to have dominant stuff like he does, you're a Hall of Famer. If you guys don't throw hard, where's Stumpy? Stumpy, you've got some tools. You figure stuff out in a hurry. You might have to be one of those 3 pitch to 2 location guys right now. But if you put the numbers up, you play. So yes, everything you do is 1 pitch at a time. Hitters had to adjust to Nolan. I had to adjust to the hitter. My job this pitch, this moment, was to make sure that pitch got me out of the inning with that pitch. I wanted to have a 9-inning complete game with 27 pitches. I figured the more they saw me, the worse it was going to be. So that's how I approached it. And I wasn't pitching with fear. I was pitching with the knowledge that unless I used all 3 pitches, this pitch didn't matter. I hope that makes sense. Hitters have to adjust, like most of the kids sitting in the room. They have to adjust to you. You throw like me, you have to adjust to the hitter, 1 pitch at a time. That's the way I did it.
Thanks, Tom. How about the importance of routines, both practice routines and pre-pitch routines? Structured, unstructured? How did you use routines to help you prepare mentally to compete?
Now, obviously, there's two different mindsets here. Okay, I work from the planet Zoom. He's been on planet Earth most of his life. But we found something in common. Even though we looked at it differently, we're probably, am I right, the two most routine pitching coach pitchers. I mean, we fall in a pattern and manage that pattern to prepare physically, mentally, nutritionally, and biomechanically for every day of our pitching existence. One of the reasons we hit it off so well when we first got together in the same environment wasn't because we thought alike, because the thought process is strange, or we're put together emotionally the same way. But we had the same belief system that if the base was strong enough and the routine was well thought out and continued to evolve to be the best, that routine would carry you when the pieces were falling apart. And I don't know how you felt about it, but I felt like if I was the best prepared 82-mile-an-hour fastball in the big leagues, I could survive. I knew everybody threw harder than I did, but I didn't want anybody to out-prepare me, and that's where the routine came in. And my approach was a little different, but I had a routine that worked for me. No?
Well, my routine was very important to me, and I made a point that when I went to the ballpark, I went there early enough that I could get my workload in without being interrupted or distracted. And so I would block off that amount of time, whether it was an hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever I needed. And when I went out there, I went through my routine, I went through my work regimen. That's what I was there for. And so if people asked, I'd say, yeah, you know, if somebody wanted to do an interview or they need something, I'd say I'll be through at 5 or 5:30 and come back and we'll do it. That was real important to me, and I felt like that that was part of my job, and that I had to do it to be prepared. And that, as we talked earlier today, that's one thing that you can control. You can control your preparation. That's in your hands. You just have to make that commitment to prepare and know what you have to do to be prepared. And I want to tell you, if I wasn't able to do that, then I didn't feel like that I was as prepared as I wanted to be, and it bothered me. And I wanted to make sure, and it was part of my routine was to do it. So it was just like knowing the team I was going to face at that next start, knowing what hitters in that lineup were hot, what they were doing, how I was going to pitch to them. That was all part of the preparation of the routine. And I had to do that before I went out and pitched, because if I didn't, then I wasn't prepared. And so it was extremely important to me, and I made a point to find time to do it because it was the #1 priority each and every cycle on my starts.
How about confidence? What advice would you give to a pitcher who doesn't stand on the mound and think he's going to blow away the world, who has a lot of self-doubts? Self-talk is not always positive. He's got a pitch to make. It's 3-2. It's the 6th inning. There are 2 men on. He makes the pitch. He's out of it. He doesn't make the pitch. He's in trouble. What advice would you give for somebody both in how to prepare and how to draw it back when the game gets tight and you've got a few devils?
Well, I think everybody that's ever stood on a mound, there's been times that you thought, at least I've experienced this, and I'm sure most people have faced it at one time or another, have no idea how you're going to get somebody out, or if you thought you'd ever throw another strike. And I've been that way in big league games, and the way I approached that was that I would step off and think about what I had to do, try to throw a strike and where I wanted to throw that ball, And then that was the only thing in my mind was, this is what I have to do on this particular pitch is, I have to make sure I stay back, I have to make sure I throw the ball properly and know where I want to throw it and not worry about anything else, because you have to take it back. I always said take it back to basics, and then you build off of that. And I experienced that a lot at times in my career, and I think it made me a better pitcher later in my career. But I was at points in my career and at times that, well, I was completely lost out there. And so I had to draw within myself because there wasn't anybody else that could do it. And so when you stand on that mound, that's your mound, it's your game, and it lies in your hands. And so you have to find a way to throw strikes and to do the things that you have to do to compete and to win ball games.
Now, I've never said this in public or written it or provided it for anybody, but I'll throw it at you right now. When I hit what I called the gnarlies, when the world was caving in on me and I had no clue what I was going to do, I took a deep breath, looked the hitter right in the face and said, how far can you hit this son of a bitch? And you know what? 9 out of 10 times the son of a bitch popped it up. I would look him right in the face and I'd go, okay, how far can you hit it? Thanks very much, you dumb shit. Let's go sit down. Now, I'm not recommending that for everybody, but it worked for me. When it's called an emergency stroke in golf, I mean, you're a golfer. When rectus, you guys know what rectosphincteralis is? I cleaned that up. When it's puckering, just kind of laugh at it and say, okay, I know I'm not doing it right the other way, let's try this. Nate, how far can you hit this thing? Whack, pop-up. And I swear to God, whatever it is, it empowered me to get the superstars out. And the everyday, that was some, call it experience. Now, you have to have the confidence to know that sometimes he's going to hit it 500 feet. You have to have the confidence to try something different. I'm trying to think. Maddox makes stuff up on the mound. He will literally make stuff up. David Cohn, when he was struggling with throwing, he hadn't thrown a knuckleball in his life. He'd throw one. If what you're doing isn't working, try something else. Now, I haven't quite polished that teach yet, but there's something in there.
A couple people want to know what the furthest ball hit off of both of you were. They don't remember.
I got two.
Well, one thing about being a power pitcher, and when the guys would center them, they didn't build big enough ballpark. But Dick Allen probably hit two of the longest home runs off of me, and then late in my career, and Tom will remember this, I think I'd struck Bo Jackson out
11 straight times.
First 11 times I faced him, I struck him out all 11 times. And we were playing a game in Arlington Stadium, and it was, I don't know, 6-0, 6-1 or something. And it was about the 7th inning, and Bo was a low ball hitter. If you threw it from his knees down, he crushed it. He threw it from his waist up, he couldn't touch it. And so we had a couple of guys, they had a couple of guys on, and there were 2 outs, and I was throwing him just fastballs, and I got 3-2 on him, and I knew if I threw him a fastball just above his belt that I had him for number 12. I threw 4 fastballs in a row, and I couldn't quite get him as high as I wanted him, and he was just barely fouling them off. And then on number 5, when I released it and it came out of my hand, I knew it was down. And a bad feeling came on. And when he hit it, I had to turn and watch in Arlington Stadium where it hit in dead center field. It hit halfway up the bleachers. The longest home run ever given up in Arlington Stadium. And in those days, when you hit them like that, the wind, you hit them that high, the wind would knock them down. Well, it did knock that one down. that's when you have to tip your hat on. So those are the ones I remember.
But you won the game, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we won the game.
Bill?
Do we have enough time for yours, Tom?
Actually, I didn't give up a whole lot of home runs, but the ones I did give up were real long. Anybody ever been to Veterans Stadium in Philadelphia? Seen the Victory Bell dead center? Lazinski hit it right below the Victory Bell on a slider that didn't. Do you remember what Lazinski looked like? You know, and all he did was that. And I'm thinking fly ball center field. And it's bouncing off the wall. But the longest one is in, ask Cliff Johnson. We're from Texas. Anybody remember Cliff Johnson? I'm with the Braves. I put up some pretty good numbers. We're playing against Houston. Vic Carell is the catcher. Cliff Johnson pinch hits. And it's foul ball, foul ball, foul ball, foul ball. I just, you know, he's right on everything, not quite. Vic Carell jogs out and said, "What are we going to throw him?" And I said, "I don't know, what do you think?" He said, "Well, the only pitch he hasn't seen is a fastball in for a penny, in for a pound." There's, in the top row of the old Astrodome, there's like 2 rows of orange seats. he broke the seat closest to the foul pole, and the furthest, and I think it's the longest home run, until Schmidt hit the center field speaker. It's been the longest home run that's been good enough. Those 2, and that was for a guy that only threw 82 miles an hour. So think about the strength of the guys that hit him up. Those are 2-mile long balls.
We were talking out here earlier today about the last game of the World Series this year. And did you guys both see it? The question was, Levan Hernandez threw a few balls in the first inning and wasn't very happy with the umpiring. And one of the things that happened, the question out here was twofold, basically. Is it true that these balls that seem to be right down the middle that are called balls are really balls? What is the status of the umpiring in Major League Baseball compared to other baseball? And as a pitcher, when you see the ball coming right down the middle and it's ball 1, or clearly a strike and it's ball 1, how about the comportment, the way you're composed, the way you act? How important is it, you know, to the success of the pitcher?
Well, if you want to find a reason for not doing something and letting something be a distraction, that very well could be. Because early in my career, when I wasn't throwing a lot of strikes and I threw a strike and they missed it, it was real irritant to me. And you can let that be a distraction if you want it to be, but you have to block that out. My attitude got to be is, if they missed a pitch, and I think the thing that helped me the most was umpiring some of my children's games, because then I really had an appreciation for umpiring, because there's a gray area on the inside and a gray area on the outside, and it's human nature to call pitches, and if you're calling pitches, then pretty soon you'll have a tendency to want to widen the strike zone, because where is that pitch? Was it half inch further out or half inch further in? And then if the game's going one way or the other, and I found the same way with kids, that I didn't want to strike that kid out as an umpire. Borderline pitch, so it's a ball. So I found that those things happen. It's a human nature and a human element in it. And so because of that, I couldn't let that affect my approach to the next pitch. And I always had a saying, don't let the failure of your last pitch affect the success of your next pitch. And so what does that say? And I saw a lot of young pitchers do this. They would throw a fastball, and a Johnny Bench or somebody would hit it out of the ballpark, and they wouldn't throw their fastball over for 2 more innings for strikes if they lasted that long, because all of a sudden they've lost confidence in their fastball. They think they can't throw their fastball, when there were a lot of things that led to their failure on that fastball to Johnny Bench. One is a power hitter, and if you give him a good pitch to hit, he's supposed to hit it. But 2, the count might have been in his favor. It may have been a fastball down the middle. You didn't get it where you wanted going. So there's a lot of factors that come into play. And so my attitude was that I couldn't let that affect my next pitch.
I had another epiphany. My second game in the big leagues, there was a guy named Al Barlick behind the plate, and I threw what I thought was a perfect strike on the inside flat, and Al Barlick called it a ball. And when I threw the ball, a little sweat got on my glasses. I got the ball back, put the glove underneath, I took my glasses off, and I wiped it down, and I looked at Barlick, and I went, oh, the only game I've been thrown out of. Barley came out, you out of here. Let's see if I can clean this up. He said, I've been umpiring since you was dumping yellow in your drawer. Get the hell off my field. Now what did I do? I didn't really, and he came in, he sought me out after the game, pulled me aside and said, sit down. He said, if you ever show emotion on the mound to an umpire, it better be neutral. Don't kiss his butt and don't let him see you're pissed off. Be neutral. Throw strikes and the game will take care of it. But we played for a guy, Bobby Valentine, that personalized his battle with umpires. And our pitching staff suffered. Umpires are a necessary part of the game. Be neutral. Let your ability to throw strikes dictate how they relate to you. Don't kiss their butts and don't let them know you're pissed off. What do? Neutral. And that means body language, that means eye contact, neutral. And by nature of the game, if you throw strikes, you work quickly, you put the ball in play, it's hot, their back hurts. If you keep the game going, the strike zone gets bigger, I'm telling you. If you're ball 1, ball 2, 2-1, 3-1, foul ball, 3-2, you think that umpire is going to be on your side? Throw strikes. Be neutral with your look and let the game call the game. That's the way I went after it.
Let's talk pitch calling. Two parts to it around these kinds of ideas, but the essential part of it is, do you have a bias as to where you think who ought to be calling pitches, coaches or players? But also, what happens to the player from this group? What happens to the player who continually is disagreeing or disagrees or feels like the game being called from the bench is not one he can throw?
Well, I never was in a situation where somebody called my pitches, and I don't agree with that on a personal basis, because if I felt like that if I was going to coach a kid and I needed to call his pitches, and I needed to sit down and we go over what he needed to do in that game and get a game plan about the guys we're going to face, and I always wanted pitchers to know what's your strength, what's your weaknesses, and what percentage of your pitches you throw for strikes. We knew that. I threw 70% fastballs, basically. And I knew that when I threw my curveball, if I threw my curveball for over 55% strikes, then I had high strikeout games. If it dropped below that 55, then I didn't have those high strikeout games. It was an average game for me. So my curveball was a reason that I had high strikeout games. If I had 16 strikeouts that night, it was because I threw my curveball for a higher percentage of strikes. We knew that, like, I don't remember the exact figure, but 98% of first pitch curveballs I threw for strikes were never put in play. People always took, what did I tell you? They went up there looking for my fastball. So if I had confidence to throw my curveball over, that was a given strike I had. They gave me a strike. Okay? But I had to know I had to throw that pitch, I had to throw it for a strike. I personally think that pitchers should throw their own pitches and they should make that decision, because if there's any, and I think what Pat demonstrated tonight. If there's any indecision or negative thoughts about, I don't want to throw this pitch, the success of that pitch drops considerably. The chances of them being successful with that pitch lessen a whole lot. And so I never have been in favor of it. I think if people are going to call pitches, they need to talk to the pitcher and they have a game plan. And if a kid has indecision, then he can look for help over in the dugout or whatever. Now the catcher, all a catcher does is initiate the call. You are the pitcher, it's your pitch, you make the decision what you're going to throw. And a good example is last year I played, Pudge Rodriguez came up at 19 years old, didn't speak any English, came from AA, and he didn't know anything about our team or the team we were playing. And he started that night and caught me. Well, Pudge had to initiate the call, but I was the one that decided what pitch we were going to throw by either shaking him off, and I would give him a signal that if I wanted it in or out, if I didn't shake, it was in, and if I shook once, then he went out with the fastball, because I threw the majority of the fastball. My curveballs, I didn't move in and out except on left-hander, so it wasn't an issue. And then one thing I did, I never liked to shake my changeup. So for 20 years, I gave my changeup sign by showing my teeth, and nobody ever picked it up. All I did like that to the catcher, and they picked it up because they washed your face. And that's how I called my changeup for 20 years. And I forgot who it was. I had a catcher that caught me and knew that, and then we played against him. And he told their teammates, and they said, "We're not looking for that." They thought the guy was setting them up. And it never crossed my mind until the game was over that, hey, I'd forgotten that he knew that.
Who was that?
I can't remember who it was. I'm trying to think of it. It might have been Jeff Torborg when he coached the White Sox.
Now, we'll take this a little further. I said, Nolan, I think they're giving you pitches. I don't give a shit. If I throw what I want to throw where I want to throw, they ain't going to hit it no way. Now, he said something, I want you to lock on. Play the game before the game. If you have an idea, you and your catcher, and if the coaches want to sit in on and find how you're going to pitch to every hitter before the game starts, then a whole lot of shake and bake that takes place during the game is taken care of. If you give the entitlement of a pitch call to someone beside yourself, you're not fully committed. Secondarily, if it's a good pitch and you get someone out, someone else gets the credit. If it's a bad pitch and you give up a home run, you lose the ball game, it's their fault. It's your responsibility and your pitch. It's your win, it's your loss. Make it yours. And if you're out there by guessing, by golly, if you don't have a plan with each hitter, then you're really not pitching. How many kids in here actually have coaches who call the game for you? Raise your hand. That usually becomes about the coach's ego. And you guys are going to have to learn to call pitches for yourself before it's over. Learn it early. Now don't go to your coach and say, Tom House says you're full of crap. Not a good thing to do. Go to your coach and say, Coach, I want to make this game mine. Let's go over how we're going to pitch each hitter before the game starts. But what if you don't know the team you're playing? You guys have been around me. What are you supposed to do with your catcher? Watch the opposing team's batting practice. If you watch the opposing team's batting practice, guys that stand on the plate, you're going to locate the ball away. Guys that stand off the plate, you can throw the ball in. Crouch hitters are high ball hitters. Stand-up hitters are low ball hitters. Tells you where to locate your fastball. If you're like Nolan, you throw it 70% of the time, you watch the opposing team's batting practice, you know where to throw your fastball, you're halfway there. Bill.
McCarter was saying Tim Salmon's a low ball hitter.
Well, you watched the balls that Tim Salmon hit out of the ballpark, and they were basically thigh to belt buckle. A low ball hitter is thigh to knee, actually thigh to mid shin. But you should have an idea where you want to locate your fastball. Did you hear what Nolan said about first pitch curveball? How many of you kids, literally, if I was to say, here's $1 million, would you throw your curveball for a strike right now? One pitch, first pitch. You guys that can do that, first pitch curveballs put in play. Hitters hit .078. We figured this out. When he got ahead with a curveball, it was Katie bar the door. You should be able to master the curveball. Real quickly, how many of you have command of the third pitch? Now, I watched 14 kids throw today, and everybody did well until they got to the third pitch. How many have been told by a skipper, don't get beat with your third best pitch? That's all I heard growing up. You don't have a third best pitch, you have 3 best pitches. When he added the changeup to his repertoire, he went from a 500 pitcher to winning almost 3/4 of your ball game. The third pitch made the difference in Nolan's wins and losses, even on mediocre ball clubs. 3 pitches to 2 locations. Don't argue with your coach, sit down, figure out how to call the game before the game starts. Make sure you and your catcher are on the same page. It's as simple as that.
Thanks, Tim. A couple more here you gave me. Follow-up questions from you. Any thoughts as we're doing these things? Yeah.
Just it's another question.
Okay, I'll repeat it.
How do you deal with criticism? I mean, criticism from teammates, criticism from just criticism.
Question is how do we deal with criticism? You know, pointed feedback, criticism from teammates, managers, right? Other players,
Press.
press.
Guys like me get criticized a lot. Guys like him, very little. It's the superstars pretty much have it. I'm not saying they have it easier because being a superstar has a whole different set of parameters. The guys that get criticized the most on a ball club are the ones that can be criticized. So you kids that aren't superstars, it takes a thick skin. Does it make anybody else, does it make any different on what somebody else thinks of you? It's how you think about yourself. Is this man deciding whether you win or lose a ball game because he doesn't like you or does like you? I think Nolan said this. You guys, keep your friends when the season's over. You don't have to like the guy you're playing with. You don't have to like sports writers. You don't have to like umpires. You have to like yourself. Does that concept make sense? If you don't like yourself, who's going to like you in a game of failure coached by negative people in a misinformation environment? How do you like yourself? Bryce, how do you like yourself? By being the best prepared Bryce Mooney that you can be. If you're not, you've heard, what did Nolan say about preparation? He didn't feel right. His preparation became where he didn't feel right if he wasn't prepared. It's got to become a habit. How many of you guys, if you're not feeling quite right, feel like you pitch real well? How would you like to go between the lines every time you went out there knowing, I've done everything I could possibly do to prepare for today's game, yippee, let's see what's happening. Isn't that a pretty easy little thing to think about? Would you agree, Tex? You got anything to add to that?
Well, one thing about criticism is we have to deal with it in this sport. And because you're a pitcher, there's probably more focus on you than probably anybody else on the field. And so the way I looked at criticism was that consider the source that's criticizing. Also consider the criticism. And if it's something that you do need to address that can make you a better player, then you ought to consider it. But if you don't feel that it's coming from someone that's trying to help you become a better player, and it could be jealousy or whatever, then you have to disregard it. Talking about preparation, how many people have ever gone to take a test in school and know they hadn't really studied very well for it? And that's not a very good feeling, is it? But if you really prepared yourself for that, and you go in, you kind of look forward to that test because you think you're going to do real well on that test, you know. Well, that's the way I felt about preparation for my game. And I sure didn't want to have that feeling going out there on the mound before the game ever started that I had when I didn't do a whole lot of studying prior to the test. And that's the way I kind of looked at preparation.
One more question? One more? Who would it be? Yes, sir.
I read a lot of autobiographies on pitchers from late all the way up to today, and it seems like almost everybody, even though they were in the major leagues, had problems with control. And I asked Nolan if there's anything that you, or Tom, if there's anything that you would do different from this age on up to master that particular problem, because it seems to be an imminent problem with almost all pitchers until they, for some reason, they find that niche where they get the control. They didn't have it until they were way into their 20s and stuff.
It's sort of the question, if I knew then what I know
What would you
now,
have done different?
what would you have done differently around the control issue?
Exactly what you're sitting here learning right now. The Mark Pryor analogy. Mark Pryor would have gotten to the big leagues if he never would have run across any of this. He just got there sooner with a four-legged table that was health, performance, and pitch totals. So your kids are, you being here, you're getting the best information that exists on how to master what it takes to pitch a baseball successfully at your level of competition. We didn't have that when we went through it. And so just, it sounds awful simple, doesn't it? But you kids just have to continue to do what we fiddled with today out in the bullpen, what you've done with Sean, what you're doing with the mental emotional. Tomorrow we're going to fiddle a little bit with nutrition. Got to put all the pieces together. You're doing what you need to do by being here.
Well, I'm going to echo what Tom said. We didn't have access to the information that y'all have. But you're going to have to take that information and you have to apply it. And one of your challenges should be to yourself is, how many strikes do you throw? And that should be your goal, is every time you go out and work on your pitching and you throw, you want to increase the percentage of strikes you throw. And I want to give you an example. Roger Clemens, the first year he came to the big leagues, I forgot how many innings he pitched as a rookie, but I think he only walked like 37 hitters the whole year. That's phenomenal. You know, now you look at Roger Clemens and he walks 2.5 times that. And you go, why is that? Well, I think Roger's stuff isn't as good and he developed a different pitch, his split finger, and he's not nearly as consistent with it as he was with his stuff when he was younger, but he doesn't have the same stuff. And the reason that he competes today on this level was he's lost 4 to 5 miles an hour off his velocity. His breaking ball isn't what it is. Those are the things that naturally happen to you when you start the aging process, and it affects each one of us differently. So to compensate for that, he came up with a split finger. And the nights that his split finger is on, it's devastating. The night that it isn't, his pitch count goes up, his percentage of strikes drop, and he struggles. But he developed another pitch so he could continue to compete on the level that he was accustomed to competing on. So you need to learn to throw strikes, and the way you do that is by taking the information that you get at this camp, understanding how much your core strength is, how important that is to you to control your body. Because if you can't control your body, you can't throw strikes. So that's the first thing you have to do, is you have to be strong enough to control your body to throw strikes. And that's why Charlie Huff, and Tom will tell you this, Charlie Huff would throw, I mean, he would, all day he was out there throwing. And it looked like he was just like shadow boxing or something. He was out there because he knew on his knuckleball, and why people don't throw knuckleballs, is your release point is so fine. If your hand's there versus there, it affects what happens to the ball down there in great amounts. And so his release point had to be the same. So it was repetition, repetition. So when he released the ball, he tried to release it the same every time so he could throw strikes with his knuckleball and get the action that he wanted. That's how important that was, and he knew that that's what he had to do to be successful. He couldn't get you out any other way. And when he struggled, it was because his release point, his body didn't allow the release point to be there, and he would struggle. But the nights that it was there, his timing was there, boy, they didn't touch him.
Thanks, Nolan. Before you go anywhere, last question for both of you. Favorite manager of all time, and why? Favorite coach? Could be coach or manager of all time.
Well, because of the length of my career in some of the ball clubs, I was with the Angels 8 years, and I think we had 7 managers. That tells you what kind of ball club we have. Because they always fire the manager when you don't win. I had some managers, Gil Hodges, when I was with the Mets. I had him for 4 years, and I thought he was as good a big league manager as I ever played for. I think there was a fella that didn't get to the big leagues for 30 years. He put 30 years in the minor leagues. He lives in San Diego by the name of Dave Garcia. That was my manager 1 year with the Angels, and probably enjoyed him as a manager as much as anybody ever played for, and I thought he knew the game as well as anybody ever played for.
Thanks, Nolan. Tom?
A guy named Eddie Matthews, and this is how the first manager-pitchers meeting went. I hate pitchers. If you throw strikes, you pitch. If you don't throw strikes, you're gone. As long as you throw strikes, we'll get along. The only time I want to see you is when I put you in a game or taking you out. Stay the hell away from it. Had my best 2 years for him because I knew where I stood. If I threw strikes, I was in games. If I didn't, I was back in AAA. I threw a lot of strikes in 74 and 75. Had my 2 best years for a guy that hated pitchers. You don't have to like your skipper. He just got to put you out there and believe in you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Nolan.